1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End of test.
Discovery, Houston. Recommend vector transfer to the BFS.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Gillespugin, sitting in front of the computer, is trying to type. He places both hands above the keyboard. He gives up, exhausted, and his hands drop into his lap. After resting for a time, he raises his hands again, only to drop them as before.
My definition of electronic literature is, I want to say stories, because I always associate stories with literature. And electronic means that there has been either some intervention in the authoring process, which involves digital technology, or in the delivery process, which has digital technology.
I try to recall winter as if it were yesterday, she says, but I do not signify one way or another. By 5 the sun sets and the afternoon melt freezes again across the blacktop into crystal octopi and palms of ice, rivers and continents beset by fear.
Welcome to Alan Sondheim's live performance through YouTube, hosted by the Electronic Literature Lab at Washington State University, Vancouver. I'm Dene Grigar, the lab's director, and with me is my colleague, Richard Snyder, the assistant director of the lab, and of course, Alan Sondheim and his partner, Azure Carter. Today, Richard will be leading the event and moderating the Q&A, so I'd like to turn this over to Richard Snyder. Thank you. I'm going to get up and let Richard sit down and take my place.
Thank you, Dene. I'm Richard. I'm the assistant director, as Dene said, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alan Sondheim. Over the last few days, I've been fortunate enough to spend time with Alan going through many of his works, and I'm really excited for what he has to show us today. Alan is the author of numerous books, chapbooks, ebooks, videos, recordings, performances, and articles. He was the second virtual writer in residence at the Trace online writing community, and he developed the idea of code work. Since 1994, he's been working on the Internet Text, a continuous meditation on philosophy, psychology, language, body, and virtuality. Much of his recent artwork can also be found on his YouTube channel. He's just published an article in 2600, the Hackers Quarterly, entitled Hacking Motion Capture Hardware and Software. Today he'll be showing us some of his early teaching materials, as well as various pieces including recent video work with virtual realities and avatars. Many of these pieces will be made available in the Alan Sondheim Collection, which is coming next year to the next. And at the end of the talk, Alan and his partner Azure Carter will be giving a live musical performance, and then we'll end with Q&A. So without further ado, Alan.
Thank you.
Hi, I want to thank everybody who's here and thank the people who have made this possible, particularly Dene Grigar, John Barber, Richard Snyder, Greg Philbrook, Holly Slocum, and Joel Clapp. I'm going to show a variety of things. I've been online. Actually, I got online late, around 1994, with an IBM, I think it was an IBM XT, that had no Windows on it at all, but it did allow me to work in BASIC and then a little later in QBasic. And by the time Windows came along, I liked Windows 95 a lot because it worked very quickly. It was instant on, instant off. Now all of these interfaces for me are very, very bloated. I do a lot of my work for that reason in Linux, which is still relatively fast. So what I'm going to do is just show some material from older presentations, older work, older teaching. And I created this thing for using for teaching. I guess this is probably between 1994 and 1996 somewhere. And all of this is nothing but little windows like that, and the windows basically are about modalities of speaking in the first person. Most of my work is concerned with body issues. So when I communicate, I take myself for granted. So I might write, I say hello. So right now I'm speaking to you, I'm taking myself for granted. If I get laryngitis or something, I have to work around that. If I get various kinds of illnesses, I have to work around that. So you don't take yourself for granted that much. So the body comes to interfere. But right now it's as if I'm a speaking sphere, so to speak. It's a surface. It's kind of surface. So when I communicate, I take myself for granted. So I might write, I say hello, so I'm saying hello to you. I say hello, hello, say hello. You say hello. Alan, hello. Hello, my name is Alan. I love you. How do you feel? Hello, my name is Julia. I love you too. This is fun. If you look at the lower part of the screen here, I don't know if you're seeing me or just seeing the screen, but if you look at the lower part of this image, you notice there's a dotted line and it says name. And this is the form that a Linux application called YTalk takes. And I've done a lot of work with YTalk, and I think there's going to be some of that showing up here in a minute. There's also moos and muds. These were early ways of creating virtual spaces. And here, I think this was probably with Sue and Trace, where I say I type at send Sue. You say it asks for a subject, I give a subject. Sue says, how do you give a subject? And this goes back and forth. I don't actually remember which application did this, but this was very early communication. It was going on here for 4 minutes and 8 seconds on the lower right. It's written in lower ASCII, which means it's just very simple type. There's no italics. You can sometimes put an underline and then type and then underline, and that's assumed to be italics, what's between the underlines. Okay. So this is this kind of conversation. And it's you say, and so I'm now put into a second person thing. It says you say, Sue says, so it's between second and third person. It's lost the first person. Okay, this screen is from IRC, Internet Relay Chat early on. And where the bright yellow lines are, those lines indicate they're private messages. And what I had my class do at one point, this was years and years ago, of course, 20 years ago, more, I guess. What I did with my class was I asked everybody to take on a female name. So they took on a female name and they went on to Internet Relay Chat. And it didn't seem to matter what the channel was. This is a channel called Sex, but it could have been any channel. And what happens is anybody who has a female name is immediately hit upon, to the point that in some of the things, like here at the bottom, Bruce Mack says from New Zealand, hi, Susan. Doug from Syracuse, New York says, hi, Sue, because Sue has come on as a woman. And what happens with this is you begin to see the sort of a very early example of the kind of things that are happening now to women or to other groups, minority groups, gays and so forth, online. And when you went on like this, if this screen was allowed, if this was a live screen, it went on, eventually the screen would be filled completely with yellow. In other words, it would be everybody would be private messaging, trying to private message and hit on one or more women, and whatever discussion was there would completely disappear. Here's another discussion. So this is a more normal one because it's in something called philosophy. And you can see here an example of woven text. Because by woven text, I mean that these are interlocked conversations, and I don't know, I don't see my hands, I guess. They're interlocked conversations, and so you have to jump from one to another and follow. This is all IRC Internet Relay Chat. And at any one time, I don't know how many people were on IRC, but I'm guessing hundreds of thousands, and I'm guessing that there were probably maybe 100,000 channels open at any one time. This is Y-Talk. Y-Talk is something I used a lot for my work. So I'm writing back and forth to my friend Lee Calvert. At my end, you can't see me gesturing, I don't think. At my end, it says, "Hi Lee, this is an example of Y-Talk." I'm typing that in live, and she's typing at the bottom. So we each have our own spaces. Our own bodies are presented in two different places on the screen. They don't interact. But if you can do something here by writing a text, you actually see the typing going on live. So if I wanted to write, "Lee Calvert, I really hate you. I wish you were dead," I could type that in and then erase it quickly. So it would almost appear and it would disappear really quickly within maybe a half a second of finishing it. So it would look as if I didn't say that. So you can use the timing to create different kind of emotional reactions with Y-Talk. Y-Talk later developed into something called N-Talk, which allowed more than two people to come on at the same time. This is the Trace writing community, online writing community. I was the second writer in residence here. And here I'm chatting. I think I'm chatting by myself. There were 7 local and 7 global users on, and I'm talking and nobody's answering me, so I'm just saying I'm all alone. This seems to be the case. I wander around looking forlorn. And again, this is not lower ASCII, but it's kind of like that. If you see trace underline online underline writing community, you can see how all of those things are connected. This is an example. I'm not quite sure what this is. I think this might be postmodern culture, MOO. MOO standard for multi, what was it? Multi-object, I forget. What? Multi-object oriented. So you get a mapping here that's done again in lower ASCII, and you get a map of a classroom and I think that this might have been MIT, as I said. So you can literally start in Portal if you're in Portal, and you can type "go right" and enter Paula's office. You can type, .go left, and so forth and so on. You get to any of these other spaces where there would be other things going on. So the map had an odd ontology to it, in a sense that it doesn't direct you elsewhere, directs you more into the map, but the map then opens up into a place where there'd be other people to talk with. This is an online conference, and I forget where I was doing this, or I don't even remember what I was using for this, but this is early, and there are a number of people talking. Some people are on video up above. Some people are putting up still images. Some people are typing down below, and so you get a multimodal way of talking here. And again, these things were all before the year 2000. This was the most sophisticated thing that came along, and I used this a lot. This is called See You, See Me, and you had a little spherical video camera attached to the computer screen, like the camera that we have here that I'm pointing to right now. You had a little spherical camera that picked you up, and other people came on, and each one had their own window. This is a lot like what's going on now, for example, in Zoom, but you could move the windows around, you could turn other people's windows off, you could enlarge your own, and so forth. And then you typed below. It was both audio and visual, and you could also type in here: visible users 5, hidden users 8, lurkers 1, 14 participants. You can see that in the lower left. This was when AOL was going big. You can see AOL on the left. And there's Netscape, but that's Netscape 1.0. I still have Netscape 1.0 software, and I also have Netscape 0.95 pre-release software. There's a Mosaic there also, which was an early predecessor of Netscape. These are some of the people in the room. Here's another one of these examples of moos and muds and so forth. You can pick up the gold coin. That's irrelevant. This is irrelevant. This is a description of an early adventure game. A lot of you have worked with these. You can go into the adventure game, by the way. The software is very simple, so you can go in there and you can change it around and make anything you want out of it just by, it's easy to catch on to how that's organized, and I think it's only 25K. I don't remember right now. This is early, the real player showing Japanese discussion and other channels that were available. It was running at the high speed of 32.9 kilobytes per second. This is called The Palace, which I think was started by Time magazine. And I'm in there all alone saying, so great, can't believe it. This was an early virtual world. It was a flat world. If you saw the hand moving right there, I don't know if I can, well, I don't think I can get it to move without going out and coming back in again. But that, let me see if I'm back up. No, it's not going to move. But this is worlds away. Another example of one of these early worlds. Everything faces forward. There's limited movement, limited animation. The background is only a painting or a picture of some sort. And that's that. So I was working with that early. Now I've got to get out of this. Got to get out of this. Will this get me out? Is this going to take me? Okay. And go back to the traversal. This is the kind of thing I was having my class think about. And this was from around 1995. And the reason that this is interesting to me is because this talks about a computer as a living organism, or thinking about a computer as a living organism, or thinking about you as a computer. But a lot of it is based on the idea of a body. What is a living thing? What does it mean to be alive, and so forth. So this is Poetry Questions and Answers. That was also a poem. This was published in a bunch of places, I think. And can you substitute new letters and words? Can you translate what you write into another language? Can you change another language back into English? Is it the same English? Can you make a picture with big type? So forth and so on. Write a poem about flying through the screen, and write a poem about flying back out through the screen. Write a poem about a subject a computer can't be used for. Pretend that the computer wrote the poem. What does a computer poem sound like? And this is planning board for education. Did a computer draw anything, design anything in this room, draw a picture of a computer on the board, and so forth? What is a computer doing? Are there people in a picture? This might sound very simple to you, but when we were talking about this today, Richard and I, and it can be very complex to try to work through these kinds of answers today. Is your mouth an interface to your stomach? That kind of thing. Okay, so this is all early stuff. Early on, I also got interested in the idea of code work, and I wrote an article for the American Literary Review, something like that, that defined a field called code work. I worked out the idea, the concept of code work, and the name, talking to Mackenzie Wark at the time. And so code work for me is using code as a way of transforming a text, but also using code as a way so that the text appears uncanny in its relationship to to code. It's as if you're sensing that there's another being in there working on the code, working on the text, rather, writing it with you or taking what you write and changing it. So I did a little short video about this.
Okay, hi. I'm going to try to demonstrate code work with a very simple example. The first thing I have to do is get rid of my image. So there you are, and here's the text. I was talking down a hill and riding on a horse and flying through the air, and a horse with no rider came through on waves of foam and still, and it was night, and the horse had one glowing eye, and the rider had the other, and Azure called to me, "Hurrah, hurrah," and in the mist there was a mountain riding a horse down a valley, and everything was plain, plain, plain. So you have that text, so I save that text. I get out of there, and I label that text ZZ. So if we look at ZZ, you have that. So I take that, and I look at what I have here, and then I see AL3PL there. So I activate that. Perl AL3PL ZZ. Hopefully this will work. YY. So ALP3L, you can see here.
Can you bring my voice up again, or is my voice on?
Your voice is on.
Okay. So this is an example of a Perl program that was written by Jim Reith for me. And what it does is it takes, if you look at the line and parse file into words, what it does is it takes a file, like that little text file, and it applies a sign function, and any mathematical function can be put in there. So it's ZZ is the name of the file, and then anything can be put in, anything mathematical can be put in there, and it will take that mathematical equation and use it to determine the reordering the words in the file. So because it's a sine wave, you'll get things, you can see my hand moving, you'll get things moving like this, and so, like, as a sine wave does, and so you'll have words repeated at the top and then words left off as it goes down. So if I run this again, this will come through again on the sound? Okay, as I run this again.
Is composed of sines, sine waves, and a mathematical formula here. And this formula would take that little text I wrote and hopefully spread it out and turn it into something else. So, well, look, it's kind of automated system here. So, let me see. So I will open up YY. And you see YY has one line. Now you don't see it, now you see me instead, showing you that YY has one line. If I go like this, it might be magic and it might have two lines. No, it still has one line. So, okay, so we go and look at that one line. And I click on this, and if you notice, it's a much longer text. Yeah. Riding a foam horse, the end riding everything plain, down mist called I, a rider flying talking, and there azure one still rider flying, hill down horse, foam horse other and down, a with still one and in a was plain horse, the azure glowing still no horse, I, the other had and with a flying no still one, and mist valley was and rider and I azure mist horse. And this goes on for a little bit, and ends with was riding and the other had, and horse on plain, horse and the of horse talking hill, through rider and glowing called was everything down, through came was and to there a plain. Sounds like aeroplane, and mountain Ora. The of and plain riding Ora, rider and waves, and on was I riding air through. Okay, so that's the text. which is generated by a kind of code work. Now then I can also go back to the original, I think, which is ZZ, and I can go do this. I think this might work, it might not, it doesn't really. ZZ, YY. So this is another thing, this is called listing, and it takes all the words in the original and just puts them alphabetically and makes them all the same size and so forth. So there's what's in YY. No, wait a minute, that's rather in ZZ. And so now if we look at YY, we have the first part, and then the second part you can see here is simply everything arranged alphabetically, and the capitals are changed to small letters, and so that's like the basic vocabulary that's used to produce the other thing. So then YY becomes move YY to code work text. I was very tired when I was doing it. Very unbelievably tired. And that's cheating. Okay, so now we have it in code word text. I made a mistake. I'm tired. And there it is. So that's the end of that. So then I can exit. And now in something like 5 minutes and 21 seconds, 22 seconds, you have an example of the kind of way I work with code work, and it's actually going to be 28 seconds. Okay, now that we're out of these, I can show you some work. Some of you may have seen some of this. This is more interesting and more developed. The first thing I want to show is something called edge space, which is not really a work, but which is not really a work, but it shows how I work with motion capture. This gets very complicated. What I'm basically interested in is the relation of the body to technology, but more the relationship of the interior of the body, the abject body, the dancing body, the sweating body, the sexual body, you know, the body that's eating, the body that's twisted, the body that's deformed, the body that's a refugee, a body that's dying, all of these kinds of things. And so I think of the manifold, those little dots connect, which form, that you can see there, which form the outline of a body. I see that as mobile and motile. In other words, it can be transformed in any number of ways. All of the transformations I do are done live. They're not done after the fact, but they're done by remapping the body in various ways. Some of the ways are by reassigning the nodes that define the body, those little dots that define the body, reassigning them in different ways. Some of them are done by reassigning the mapping. So you have these, I don't know if you can see me, you have an assemblage or a mesh of nodes, and then you can apply a mathematical formula to that, like I just did with the language, with code work, and so it will twist it and deform it in different ways. So I'll run a little of this. It's 5 minutes.
Even if you take that into something like Motion Builder, you can still manipulate this data. But right now we're going to try to get the computer to identify them automatically. So let's go ahead and do the range of motion here.
Start G or are you at connected dots, Brian?
You know, I never really did much in the way of connected dots when I was a child.
Jeff, you gotta find a connected dots book and put it in. A connected dots challenge. See, that takes me like 40 minutes. I turn it around, I'm looking, I got a double guess on everything. So this is XYZ for each marker that he selects. And you're gonna start to see the errors.
So right now I'm just going to fill in a few holes so we can create a template to automatically identify the data.
So the holes there is where the camera couldn't see one of the markers.
This is the kind of output that I get, which I'm absolutely fascinated by. And I can save this and put this into Second Life or other virtual world. dark figure is what you're actually getting as the output. The other figure is what's trying to make sense of it. On the right is the way that its skeletal thing is determined, the vector connections.
Vortex, the capture, that's the capture. The capture software.
When it goes into that sort of thing where it's just sitting down, it's usually in a Buddha position, and software I've worked with, it means that the software has given up and can't change the body again.
Yeah.
Do you stuff near the edge?
Yes. Always near the edge. Now this is a woman in real life who is moving near the edge of what the software could work with, could determine, because there's only a certain amount of space that's activated. So by moving into the space that's not activated, into what I call edge space, you get to see sort of untoward things, making sense of something that is not conceivable. You can't make sense of it because you're outside
Okay, now
the range
stay
of
within
the
that zone
software.
and just do your ordinary movements there. Within the zone. As long as you can.
I just want to point out, if you've ever read John Manville's Travels, he wrote in the 15th century and claimed to have traveled around the world, and there are places where he could not have been. And so in those spaces you start to get things made up, what I call blank space, and they get filled with preposterous things. So for example, he claimed to go to Ethiopia, and there he found all the natives of Ethiopia had 1 foot the size of an umbrella, and they would lay on their backs and put that foot up over their heads to act as an umbrella to ward the sun off. So you get these sort of monstrosities, these inconceivable things. The here be dragons of the Middle Ages, or even in the 19th century when you look at maps of the Arctic, where Canada, as Canada approaches the North Pole, the outline of Canada, the outline becomes distorted, and it actually, and there are parts of it where the map is badly drawn. You can't tell whether you're looking at water or an island or a land mass or a lake, because the data didn't add up. So that's what's going on here. The data doesn't add up.
Second life goes 15 seconds.
This just was mapping all of this. Okay, where this can get very elaborate and work in making more complex pieces. This is a piece I did called God Mode. Was done at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and you may wonder why the character is a female character, and that is because all of the male characters we could work with were muscle bound. They were all based on superheroes, and so they were unusable because you couldn't get this kind of detail or this kind of intensity in the movement that you can get with the smaller and thinner avatars. That was the initial reason for picking this. It's also very unclear whether the skeletal configuration you've seen is running the avatar, or the avatar is running the skeletal configuration. From the midpoint on, the image disappears completely, and all that's left is the text and the sound. So it goes to a blank space that's not filled at all. Some of you may have seen this. This is a piece called Avatar Duet. The figure on the right is Fuqua de Mobilité, who was lead dancer with Merce Cunningham, and before that was lead dancer with the Stuttgart Ballet. And he's working with Maud Liarden on the right. They're both, we're all in Switzerland, and we're in a grange up in the Prealps that's probably medieval. It was, you know, for housing cattle. And they are imitating, Fuqua has worked a lot with us in the past, up to about 10 years ago, imitating avatar movement, those kinds of movements you saw. And Maud had picked up on that at the time, and so this is the two of them imitating avatar movements. I don't want to go into technical details, it would take too long here, but they come forward, and I'll skip around so you can see where they're going, where they're coming from. This was filmed in infrared. I'll skip through this. After a while, we started doing things where we were imitating the dancers, imitating avatars, and putting that imitation back into avatars, online motion capture avatars, and going back and forth. And sometimes I couldn't tell what was coming first, whether the abstraction from the avatar was coming before the body, or whether the body was coming before the abstraction of the avatar. This may look like simple dancing, but this is actually incredibly complicated. And I don't know anybody else who could really do what he does in this. lot of that, by the way, is influenced by Weimar Republic performance, which fascinates me, particularly the work of Valeska Geert. And what's her name? I just had it. Anita Berber, yeah. So the work that was done in the 1920s. And there's some similarities between the way the body is just sort of emphasized, and at the same time that it's moving, it's also encased. It's not. It's sort of within its own intense space. So there's that relationship there also. I will show you some of the things that have sound, that have text in them. These were done in Second Life or Another Virtual World.
Where are you?
So this piece,
where are you?
This piece was done between two characters, one in Second Life and one in a virtual world that I placed on my own laptop. And they're trying to communicate with each other, and the sound is put on each can hear the other, and so the sound gets all entangled. And I add verbally my own, voice to text, and then there's text to voice, and blah, blah, blah. Add my own interpretation, so it becomes a kind of melange of separation. I'll skip around because this is like 12 minutes.
This is the theater of our operations. Where are you? Where are you? Come on through to the other side. Where are you? Where are you?
Connecting to region.
Recessed, we are trying to log in and avoid being cut out entirely when this begins its process. The host cannot connect.
Chat input.
Note the other host cannot connect. Note the other host cannot connect.
This is a file.
Note the other host cannot
of
connect.
All the avatar bones.
Chat input. Hello, we are logging in. We are trying. Cut off entirely from this. The other host cannot connect. From the other sim recess, we're trying to reach recess. We are trying to log into and
This is showing all sorts of different background information that's brought to the foreground as part of it. And the characters never connect because they can't. They're in different
Perhaps
worlds.
from the other sim to local host that is starting up now, or perhaps has already begun. We're cut off from the other sim. We cut off from the other sim. Saw local host cannot connect. The other host cannot connect.
Chat input.
So forth. Two other things I'll show quickly. I'm aware of the time. Pathless Path was done a long time ago. It's about mapping spaces onto each other. Part of it was shot in the Florida Everglades looking for cacti. The part was shot in Miami streets, not Miami Beach, but Miami streets. The two interlock with each other. end on a piece, and then we're going to do a live piece about the philosophy of language, but which is 5 minutes. But I want to say something about when I work with code work, or I work with the Electronic Literature Organization, or I work on these pieces. What I'm really interested in and sort of emphasize in my more formal talks is the idea of testimony and bearing witness. So I'm interested in issues of refugee issues and how those might be represented in space. I'm interested in the writings of Paul Celan. I'm not interested in, to be honest, in artificial intelligence generating poetry. In a way, I see that almost as a kind of corruption of the real issues that we are dealing with today, with the Rohingya, with the Uyghur, with the condition of blacks in this country, with the indigenous peoples, and so forth and so on. And partly in my own background and things that happen in my own background, I'm really pushing towards dealing with the edges of things as much as I can, and I know I fail a lot. So you might have seen this piece. It was in a show, one of these shows. It's called American Life. And I'll show at least some of this, and then we'll do a performance, which is a 5-minute performance, not more. Okay, so we will do a short live piece.
Hi, I'm going to sing an excerpt from my song Marriage to Language, which is adapted from a text by the same name of Alan's that's about the philosophy of language. And I think it's funny, so feel free to laugh. I don't understand what you're saying. Perhaps I'm not hearing you clearly. Perhaps the meaning has disappeared. Perhaps the meaning has decathected. Perhaps I understand what you're saying, but don't understand why you are saying it. I don't understand your words. Perhaps their meaning is obscure. Perhaps it requires knowledge I don't possess. Perhaps I never possessed it. Perhaps I understand the meaning, but I don't understand you. Perhaps I ascribe to a different theory. Perhaps my words have lost their meaning. Perhaps my words are nothing but cries and whispers. Perhaps I understand I must reply to you, but you aren't communicating anything. I can't make sense of what you're saying. Perhaps your words make no sense to me. Perhaps I don't recognize them. Perhaps it is you who are senseless. Perhaps I recognize your syllables, but you appear to be speaking nonsense.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Q&A portion here at the end. Thank you for that lovely performance, Alan and Azure. What was that?
Oh, I just thanked you for thanking us.
So I'm looking at the chat for any questions. I think I'll just get started with one of my own, which is the internet text is a long-running daily art practice.
Right.
Since 1994, is that correct?
Since the early 1994.
So I was wondering how during this pandemic period that has affected that as a daily kind of practice.
To be honest, it hasn't affected it at all. I mean, I work through everything on it. I try to make each day a kind of holistic piece, a totality in what I'm doing, but that also fits in with the theoretical work that I'm doing. So some days it might just be several images and their interrelationship, and then a lot of times it'll be a much longer text. But I try to make work out of the assemblages of these texts. So it's a daily, I don't want to use the word meditation because it's kind of the opposite. It's a daily articulation. I was always interested in Kawara's work, you know, with I Am Still Alive, and then the day that he would do that every day, he would have another painting with that, or with Wittgenstein, which it gets very, you know, edgy towards the idea of like a continuous conversation. So in my work, I've been thinking about it. I don't think, this came out of a discussion online, I don't think, for example, that mathematics has any kind of ontology to it, except within structures of mathematics. Does a higher prime exist? No. You know, but that's like an ontological question within mathematics, or an epistemological question. But I think in the real world, when we talk about ontology with what exists, we're really talking about a fluid ontology that changes as the philosophical foundations of things change. So a Derridian deconstruction of ontology would be different than Hegel, who have been going crazy about, or not for too much longer. You know, or with Wittgenstein and the Wittgenstein's idea of the game, you know, in philosophical investigations, that it has meanings according to, you know, sort of the habitus, right. You know, that kind of thing, I think, is all the philosophical grounding we can really have. And I think the rest of it is talk.
So do you feel like in this sort of season that we're all in, that's affected how you're thinking about that daily work, if not the practice?
No, I've done it for so long. It affects the COVID situation has affected my mental state, as Azure could well tell you. I'm much more anxious than I used to be. I had a seizure where I passed out for a short time. The depression has gotten the better of me. But my work habits, you know, still stay the same, and I'm still working on the same issues I've always been working on, which is, you know, we are speaking not through the body, but it is our body. The body is speaking. You know, the body is speaking. The body is speaking, and how is that articulated? How does that work in relationship, if it does at all, to the virtual?
Well, thank you. We've got a couple of questions in the chat here. One that Kathleen Zoller had posted earlier. Kathleen's a student who graduated from our program, is now teaching with us this semester. And she says she was speaking to God mode. This makes an interesting point about the virtual body. Do we really only have one body, or do we have multiple? Do we have a new body anytime we enter a new space? Does it affect our sense of self?
I would say we can have a new body the same way we can put a new dress on, or a new pair of pants, or something. But it's our body. The body itself is, I don't want to say it's multifarious, because it's really, like, I am stuck with these hands, you know, and yes, I can get prosthetics. I can cut my hands off and get prosthetics. My mind can be changed, you know, altered by hallucinogenic drugs, but it's the same body. It's the same interiority that's always undergoing changes and always undergoing transformations. But, you know, I don't think we are all cyborgs. I don't think that in the slightest. I don't think that, language is an enemy or language is a virus. I think language is an interiority, There was a guy, a philosopher, Tran Duc Thao, who was a Vietnamese philosopher, and he was talking about that he believes that the origins of language come from gesture. So you do something like this to indicate, I don't know if to indicate you have to go around the hill to where the game is, to shoot the game, kill the game, that kind of thing. And so the gestures are also then become articulated with language, which is the gesture at a distance, or a different modality of gesture, like black field hollers in 1880s, 1890s. So all of these things are kind of interrelated, but it's the same body. It's the same body that's always undergoing transformation. We have difficulties with that as we age or as we grow into sexual efflorescence, or as we take hallucinogens if we do. All of these things are still operating, within a continually transforming arena, but it's still the same arena.
So you see the digital sort of self as part of those transformations that are
I don't know what the digital self is.
Well, in Kathleen's question, she was asking sort of about those the avatars and the digital bodies that.
Oh, I see.
Control.
I see those as character armor to use. That there's something that is representative as a simile. Deeper than a simile. An extension, a tacit knowledge, a tacit extension of ourselves, but not that the interiority isn't there, it's a shell. I think it's taken far too often for real. I really think that Facebook already has done a huge amount of damage, and now they're going to the metaverse, I think. And the metaverse, so then we're all avatars, and then we can really speak our hatred. I think it's a disaster. I think it should be the other way around. I think people should have to take more cognizance of face-to-face, and they won't. And so the damage that's done, say, to the Florida manatees, we were part of the Save the Manatee Club, to the Florida manatees or to indigenous peoples, I think is only going to grow worse.
Andrew Thompson has a question in the chat. He said, as someone interested in works that have become corrupted or lost over time, I've had a question about the red missing footage screen during one of the earlier videos. I believe that was God Mode has a missing footage in the background for a bit. And Kathleen also made a note of that as well. Was this intentional during the creation of the work, or was it a side effect of the process?
Intentional. I threw out the original. I used it for processing, and then threw out the original. So when I got back into the Adobe Premiere, it couldn't find it, and that's the message that comes up. But it still allowed the generation of the text. So the text is then going over the godless mode. Literally. I like the fact that it was red. It was kind of blood red.
So, a couple of the things that you're giving to the next to the lab are radio equipment, receivers, and we took some time looking at them this week, and I was just wondering how you've kind of had this long-term interest in radio and.
Well, particular radio. I'm interested in shortwave radio in particular. More recently, very low frequency radio, VLF radio, which picks up lightning strikes and something called the dawn chorus, and it's absolutely astonishing. You can't get near an electrical grid to hear it. I raised myself on shortwave radio. I listen to it constantly, and I'm always amazed at how that opens up. I don't want to say opens up worlds, but it's not really doing that. It's opening up weather. It's opening up spectral weather. So you can, all of those glitches, all of that static that you get when you're listening to shortwave radio, that static really fascinates me. And I look for anomalous signals. I don't know if I played you. I might have
Yeah, you showed me a few of those.
Yeah, I played you some anomalous signals. And some of them are just have never been identified. Some have been over the horizon radar, things like that. Robert Horvitz. This is a shout out to you, Robert. I've never done a shout out before, but Robert Horvitz was an expert in shortwave listening and got me listening to two particular signals and recording them. And I've gone on, I've done, for a company, I've done like videotapes of anomalous signals. I don't mean number stations. Everybody goes to the number stations. That's easy. I go to stations that are I go to things that are more unidentifiable that might even cover a great number of bands. And it fascinates me. It's like space weather. It's like if you hear a lightning stroke in very, very low frequency radio, if you hear that lightning stroke, which you do, it's a whistler, a whistler sound. That's not coming from local lightning. That's coming from the Antipodes. It goes around the world in ionization tubes down to where you are. So you're hearing something that's on the other side of the planet.
Wow.
So yes, I'm fascinated by that. We're in a sea of this.
Yeah, it's a interesting idea that's around us all the time, but we're not tapping into it.
Well, people are like you were surprised that you can listen to crystal radio without batteries. But there's energy in electromagnetic waves and enough energy to drive an earphone, and can drive an earphone quite loud.
Wow. And that's just anywhere that you might happen to be.
Yeah.
So could you tell us just a little bit more about the code work that you recorded earlier this week with the sine wave, and kind of how you got the idea for that, and if there's what other kind of techniques you're working on?
That came directly out of the work I was doing. Okay. The example I give, but this is good to put down here, the example I give is that when you're doing, say, Photoshop, and you make a picture darker, what you're actually doing is just doing a simple mathematical transformation on the pixels. And I got interested in the idea of doing mathematical transformations of movement. That's where all of the mocap stuff comes from. So you have a standardized way of recording movement, but that uses a particular mathematical set of formulas, but you go in and you change those formulas. So if you're making a movement like this in real life, and you put a tangent to that instead of a sine wave, because it all works with sine, cosine, suddenly something shoots up, because if you look at a tangent curve, it's like this, and then another one's like this, and it's broken. They meet at infinity maybe, but they're broken. So you can start actually making filters for that. And so then I got interested in textual filters. You can do that. That's really easy to do all kinds of simple textual filters. It doesn't take much to change a whole text that's small letters to all capital letters. You can, real easy transformation, all substitutions. But I got interest, but I do not have the skills. I'm not a real programmer. So I didn't have the skills to be able to say, let's run a mathematical equation that will govern the frequency and placement of words in a particular text. And so this fairly simple Perl program does that. And you can go and, it's easy. I can break it in 2 seconds and have to redo it and stuff. So, again, it was like using equations to do that. One thing we did, which I can't really demonstrate, but it's on a lot of our albums, is something called RevRev. Because I worked with a super collider expert.
Oh, wow.
So, Luc Damrage, and we were sitting around one day chatting, and I said I wanted to be able to find a way to record. So if I'm playing a saxophone note or I'm playing a guitar sound, it will play it backwards in real time. In other words, so if you do a guitar sound, it goes boing. I want to go whoop, but in real time instead of doing the boing. Well, that's physically impossible. The universe works in only one direction in time. At least our local universe. So, entropy works in one direction. So these signals, they fade out. You hit a note like that, it fades out. It doesn't go and establishes. You can do it fake, by making recording a sound and then reversing it and stuff, and you get all that bad stuff. I just don't like it. But we were trying to do it in real time, where you can't do it in real time. So we started to try to approach it. So we came up with what amounted finally to 40 programs called RevRev, reverse reverberation programs.
Wow.
That worked with buffers, and everything could be changed around. All the buffers could be changed around, and the math could be changed around, and the constants, and we got really, really strange stuff out of it. And that's on some of the records. There's a record, it's a CD. You know CDs? They're platters.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, they're platters.
They're like flatter cassette tapes.
They're more like small discuses.
Yes.
Or discoy. Yeah, so you fly one. But it did come out on, forget the company. Do you remember?
Public Eyesore.
Public Eyesore.
Oh, yeah.
So it was recorded, Public Eyesore put the album out, and you got a copy of that. And that has all the stuff that we did with that.
Wow.
And it didn't do, of course, it doesn't do RevRev because it's impossible, but it did things that are really strange. And so there's a whole bunch of that stuff.
Very cool. Well, I think we're just about out of time, so I'd like to thank Alan and Azure for coming. Thank you so much, and everybody else for coming to see presentation today.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who was there out in Radio. This is radio, isn't it? Thank you in Radio Land for listening, and tune again to 1020 on your dial for more.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
See you in the next one.
This is Houston, contact with a test. 1, 2, 3, 4.